In the previous episode, we talked about glass in its wild, natural state and about how humans first found it. I say found because at that time glass had not been invented, it had only been discovered. Humanity had realized that sand could be melted by the power of fire. But understanding something does not mean mastering it. For centuries, glass remained a cloudy, dirty material filled with air bubbles, greenish in color and coarse in texture. Yes, it was useful for making containers, and yes, it allowed light to pass through, but did not show the world as it truly was. It was not yet magical, because we had not yet attained glass's greatest power, that almost divine quality, perfect transparency. At some point in history, a group of people discovered how to make matter invisible, how to let light pass through without trapping it. And this secret was so valuable, so dangerous, that in order to protect it, they turned an island into a prison, and the masters who knew the secret into the noble prisoners of that prison. Welcome to the age when those who ruled sand challenged kings. We are going to Venice, to the time when glass itself was taken captive. The year is 1291. Venice, the queen of the Adriatic, the capital of canals, merchants, silk, and money. But that night, the city does not sleep, because the sky has turned red. Venice is burning. At that time, Venice was not made of stone buildings like it is today. Most structures were wooden, tightly packed, leaning against one another. And at the heart of the city stood thousands of glass workshops. Inside them, enormous furnaces had to burn non-stop, 24 hours a day, like hell itself, in order to melt glass. The smallest spark leaping from a chimney, carried by the sea wind, could turn an entire neighborhood to ashes within minutes. Fire was Venice's greatest nightmare. The city was facing the danger of being destroyed by its own wealth. Finally, the Venetian High Council, Maggiore Consiglio, made a historic decision. Town criers were sent into the city squares, and the following decree was read aloud. From this day forward, all glass furnaces within the city shall be extinguished. All glass masters, together with their families, apprentices, and tools, shall leave the city and settle on the island of Murano. The place of exile was a small, isolated island located just 1.5 kilometers north of Venice. The official reason sounded perfectly logical and innocent, the safety of the city. The people believed it. Perhaps the masters believed it at first as well. But this was not a safety measure. It was one of the most brilliant knowledge monopoly and isolation operations in history. The Venetian state wanted to protect its unique knowledge of glass production. While the masters were scattered throughout the city, controlling them was impossible. Foreign merchants could speak with them and learn their secrets. But if they were all gathered on a single island, then that island could become the most profitable prison in the world. So what was life like on Murano? From the outside, glittering glass, works of art, wealth. But inside the workshops, it resembled Dante's Inferno. Glass mastery was not a romantic profession like the delicate vases we see today in museum display cases. It was a harsh, dangerous, and deadly craft that demanded physical suffering and immense patience. Furnace temperatures reached up to 1,400 degrees. At that time, there were no digital thermometers and no computers regulating the heat. Everything depended on the master's intuition, the sharpness of his eye, and his ability to read the color of fire. There was no protective clothing and no ventilation in the workshops. A very strict, almost military master-apprentice system operated here. A child barely 7 or 8 years old, at an age when he should have been playing, entered the workshop as a garzone apprentice. His task was simple but heavy, to constantly feed the furnace with wood. That fire could never be allowed to go out. The children were like guards standing watch at the gates of hell. Their hands hardened with calluses from carrying wood, their eyes burned from smoke, and their lungs filled with soot from a very young age. After years of being forged in that heat, if he survived and proved talented, he would become a servant journeyman. But the real test was becoming a maestro master. Mastery meant giving up half a lifetime. Blowing glass, this act that seems so simple, is actually a violent strain against human anatomy. Masters rotated heavy masses of molten glass at the end of a pipe using nothing but their breath. Their facial muscles became deformed, their lungs collapsed from inhaling hot air, and the chemical dust they were constantly exposed to, arsenic, lead, caused many to die young or go blind. The unique beauty of Venetian glass was formed from the breath stolen from the lives of its masters. Glass was fed by human lives. The state knew exactly how valuable this sacrifice and this knowledge were. That is why it granted the Murano masters rights that no other workers in the world received. A glass master was considered part of the nobility. He had the right to carry a sword, a privilege reserved only for aristocrats at the time. They were not tried in court, they paid no taxes. A glass master's daughter could even marry the richest duke or prince of Venice. They were untouchable before the law. They lived like kings. But the gates of this paradise opened only inward. Leaving was forbidden. The island of Murano was a true golden cage. The Venetian Republic feared the leakage of secrets so deeply that it entrusted the task to the darkest face of the state, the feared Council of Ten. This council was Venice's secret service, its intelligence organization. Throughout the city were denunciation boxes known as the Mouths of a Lion. The law was clear. If a glass master leaves Venetian territory, he shall be considered a traitor. If a master dared to escape, his wife and children who remained in Venice would first be thrown into prison. If the master did not return, the council's professional assassins would be sent after him. Paris, London, or Istanbul, no matter where he hid, he would be found and silenced, usually with a dagger driven into his back, bearing the seal of Venice. The message was clear. Glass breaks, but Venice's secret, that is, our monopoly, never does. So what was this secret that people died for and were assassinated over? Glass was made everywhere in the world. Egyptians, Romans, Syrians all had glass. But their glass was cloudy green, yellowish. Venice's secret was invisibility. Natural sand always contains iron oxide. This iron gives glass its familiar bottle green color. No matter what you do, you cannot eliminate that green tint. As light passes through glass, it collides with iron atoms and is absorbed. But in the 15th century, Murano's genius master Angelo Baravier used ancient knowledge drawn from alchemy. He ground pure white quartz pebbles brought from rivers in northern Italy, and he added a very special, secret mineral, manganese. This was chemical wizardry. Manganese neutralized the green color of iron during oxidation, canceling out the hues. The result? A miracle. What emerged from a furnace looked like frozen water. Colorless, smooth, transparent. They called it Cristallo. For the first time in history, humanity had created a material through which light could pass with 99% fidelity. Wine glasses that did not alter color, mirrors that showed the face exactly as it was. This transparency granted Venice unprecedented power and wealth. Glass was no longer just a material. It had become a symbol of status and power. If a Cristallo goblet stood on your table, you stood equal to kings. Venice enjoyed this monopoly for centuries. All of Europe's gold flowed into the city, until it faced a power just as ambitious and just as arrogant as itself, France and the Sun King, Louis XIV. The king was building a colossal palace near Paris to prove his power to the entire world, the Palace of Versailles. At the heart of this palace, he demanded a room unlike anything ever seen before, the Hall of Mirrors, Galerie de Glaces. A corridor 73 meters long, lined with 357 massive mirrors. Today, we look at ourselves in the mirror every morning, and it feels ordinary. But at that time, a mirror was the most expensive and technologically advanced object a person could own. Until then, people had only seen themselves in still water or polished metal, blurred and distorted. To see oneself clearly was a psychological shock that transformed the sense of self, a magic reserved for kings. Venice refused to sell mirrors to France. It wanted to protect its monopoly. In response, the French Minister of Finance, Jean-Baptiste Colbert, launched the first major industrial espionage operation in history. French agents infiltrated Murano disguised as merchants. They searched for unhappy, indebted, or resentful masters. They promised them wealth, titles, and above all, freedom. And in the end, money defeated fear. One night, several masters were secretly taken from the island by boat. When Venice learned of it, chaos erupted. Threats, poisoned letters, suspicious deaths on the streets of Paris. A true thriller unfolded. But the secret had escaped the island. When the famous Hall of Mirrors at the Palace of Versailles was opened, it was not merely an architectural achievement. That hall was the tombstone of Venice's glass monopoly. The King of France saw his own reflection in those mirrors. Venice, on the other hand, saw the reflection of its empire's collapse. When a secret is revealed, the spell is broken. What happens when knowledge leaves the hands of a single center and begins to spread? It becomes cheaper. It becomes ordinary. And it spreads everywhere. The era of captive glass was over. The time of freedom had arrived. The Industrial Revolution was at the door. Machines would replace masters. And this freedom would bring glass down from royal palaces and into all of our homes. In the next episode, we will talk about how glass ceased to be a luxury and became the invisible giant that builds our cities and covers our buildings. From window taxes to glass skyscrapers, how did the extraordinary become ordinary? See you next week in The Spread of Glass.